welcome everyone to our Ask the Experts seminar. We certainly appreciate your time. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker today is Steve Thornton, Menifee Union School District. And Steve, why don't you take things over from here and introduce yourself and proceed. And again, welcome everyone. And Steve, take it away.
Good morning, Dennis. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, wonderful, because I had unmuted, but I wondered if I got remuted. Well, good morning, everyone. Again, my name is Steve Thornton. I'm Director of Technology for the Menifee Union School District. We're in Southern California in Riverside County. We're in the southern end of the county, not too far from most people who are out of state or out of this area don't know where Menifee is, but many know where San Diego is and perhaps even where the Temecula wine country is. And so we are just a little north of the Temecula wine country. Our district is certainly not a wealthy district, but of the school districts in Riverside County, we are the third highest socioeconomic status, with Temecula being number one, Murrieta School District number two, and us number three. I serve as I have served for the last several years on the on the board of the California Educational Technology Professionals Association. It's a 54-year-old organization of K-12 and now K-20 schools and universities and colleges, both public and private, in the state of California, serving initially in its early days as a kind of a geek squad, where all the folks at the county offices who deal with the big computers and technologies that were used in the olden days could commiserate, and it has now grown to very deeply involved ed tech in all of the schools. So we have members now that are not only geeks, directors of technology and lead technology folks, but also in many cases principals and folks from the curriculum and offices and the business offices of the school districts throughout the state. So we're involved with a number of things. And I've been with Menifee Union School District for the last 13 years. Previously, I served for a dozen years with the County Office of Education here in Riverside. Well, I'm a former teacher and principal myself, but have had kind of a geek spin in my career throughout, both in private sector and in California schools as well. So this has been kind of the perfect marriage for me, marrying my interest in education for our youth and technology. So if we move to the next screen, just a little bit about our school district. We are a K-8 school district, as it says here, 9,100 approximately students, 13 schools, 3 middle schools, 9 elementaries, state preschool. We do have urban and rural areas. We were designated a rural school district for when I first came here 13 years ago, but we are now actually designated as an urban school district, primarily a sea of homes around us. And we have 2,700 devices on our network and about 800 faculty, staff, admin members, including classified and other folks. So that's a little bit about what we look like. If we can go to the next screen. On my staff, I have a staff of 8 that work with me. The folks that are Francis, Vanessa, Cindy, and Tori. Actually, it's 9. There's one more that isn't showing up here. She's brand new. Those folks are 10-month employees. They're called tech aides. They kind of provide first-level service to the sites, and each of them has a couple of school sites assigned to them, 3 or 4. Mary on the left is our help desk technician and also office manager, and Gil and Jeff and Rich serve in technical positions here in the district office in various supporting us in various ways. So that's our staff. And then if we can move to the network diagram, what we have is a school that's very typical of the typical layout of a school district in terms of our infrastructure. We have all of the sites are homed into the district office here and then internet access happens from the district office out. We have some services that are housed at the County Office of Education, including our financial system, but our student information system and other server-based systems are here at the district office. We have a gig fiber connection between each of the school sites and the district office, and we have a gig connection between us and the County Office of Education. And among the services we get from the county office is a leg up or a connection to the K-12 HSN network, which is basically the internet here in the state of California. So we have a fast connection between us and each of our sites, and a pretty fast connection also as well from us to the internet. You'll see where we mentioned in the upper right corner the Juniper. The Juniper is our primary firewall, and we have identity detection and intrusion prevention on that system. On the inside, we have our content filtering with Lightspeed, and the SafeConnect system sits inside the firewall and provides our policy enforcement for access to various services on the network. So if I could move to the next screen. This is it isn't on your screen here, what we're seeing in the webinar. It isn't in the form of a video, but on the district website, this screen, which is the first screen you come to when you go to the technology department section of our district website, I have a YouTube video here which basically walks through the goals of the technology department and how we're designed and what our priorities are. But I think the essential goals listed right here on this screen are what kind of are at the crux of why SafeConnect became an important tool in our kit, and that is that our essential goals is that every student will have near ubiquitous access to the learning resources that they need to be successful at school and at home, and that students will use technology to master the California content standards that are as defined in the core curriculum that's being developed by SBAC. So what we see with that, and if we could move to the next screen, this is kind of a placeholder screen. What that meant for us is the need to prepare for a future in which access to technology is not sort of a nice to have, but a critical component of success in schools. I mentioned earlier that we are not we're not by any means a wealthy school district, but we are the third highest in terms of our parents, our families' socioeconomic status in the county. And what that really means for us, because in fact we're really very middle class, is that we have enough money in terms of our socioeconomic status of our families that we don't really qualify for a lot of the federal funds and things that are available to a lot of the poorer school districts. So as an example that many of you can relate to, we qualify for we qualify for telecommunications through support through E-rate, but we do not qualify for internal connections. Every couple of years, my E-rate consultant asks or suggests that we should apply for internal connections for, whatever school, one of our schools that happens to be in a poorer area of our school district. And every few years, I take her up on it and we apply and we qualify. But then when it comes right down to it, there aren't enough E-rate funds left over to fund schools at our level, even then. So we have never qualified or received internal connections funds. And so what that means, and then also the fact that we're not wealthy, some of our neighbors down in northern San Diego may have neighborhoods where there's a lot of professional ball players or other wealthy professionals whose kids go to their schools, and so those schools benefit by being able to put together private foundations that can fund a lot of the other initiatives that they have in mind. And we don't have that either. And so, like probably many of you, we're in a position where we have enough money to do most of what we need to do if we do it right and do it carefully and don't waste a dime. But we don't really have enough money to do it over again if we make a stupid mistake and start putting our limited funds into things that are what I have termed in conversations with other colleagues in my district, I call boutique technologies. The term for me means jumping on whatever bandwagon is currently in vogue that's going to make all the difference for the kids. But when you really look at it and you look at the total cost of ownership of some of those technologies and their ability to make impact over the long haul, you find that you can't get there from here because you have just enough to get you started, but not enough to train everybody to use it and not enough to replace it when it starts to break. So again, we have to be very, very careful in how we proceed. And so where SafeConnect really addressed a need for us and intrigued me was we have a SEPA, our group SEPA has in addition to an annual conference and an annual mini conference that we hold, in whichever end of the state we're not in that year for the main conference, we'll hold a mini conference. We also have what are called regional groups, and they meet every 2 months with members that are in their area. And so I'm a founding member and very strong participant in the SEPA Inland Area Technology Group, which is our regional group that serves my area. We meet every 2 months, and among the things that we do in our meetings is we have a powwow among education members only that's a vendor-free zone. But then we will invite a vendor to come and participate in a lunch and learn at the tail end of the meeting. And one of those meetings a couple of years ago, the group invited Impulse Point to come in and show the SafeConnect product as part of the lunch and learn. And I have to tell you, I was fascinated at the idea that we might be able to overcome this fact that we have a tremendous growing need to provide access to technologies for our students because of the kind of curriculum delivery that is on us now and coming in bigger measure in the near future without having to expend massive amounts of money that we don't have to provide those technologies for the kids. And the secret here is that all these kids have grandparents that give them Kindle Fires and Macs and iPads and other devices at Christmas time and birthdays and things like that. And all those kids are better than any of us at using those technologies. So why wouldn't we want to find a way to let them bring those technologies here onto campus? And the same should go for the teachers who, many of whom, while we've standardized on the PC and the Windows platform for the most part for our what we call tech plan minimum implementation at each of our schools. And we have a small augmentation of Macs and Linux devices where the need arises and can be justified. We do have teachers that, for their own preference, would like to use other technologies, and they say, gosh, I've got a MacBook at home. I'd love to bring it there, and I'd love to teach with it. So, again, why shouldn't we garner those resources that other people have and let them use the technologies that they want to use? The problem, of course, is that we have a number of things that we have to deal with on campuses that maybe are different than the Starbucks. And among them, critical is the SEPA requirements that we have to make sure we maintain protected access for our students. Another is the fact that we have a FERPA and other regulations that require us to be cautious about divulging or protecting, I should say, private student information as well as staff information from people that shouldn't see it. And a third that's very critical is in a world where we have a lot of viruses that are out there, needing to be able to protect our network from excuse me, I have a call ringing. I got to get them to get off the line just a moment. Had to press my do not disturb button there. Anyway, we have folks that we need to make sure are not infecting our network with whatever is on their devices. And so what SafeConnect allowed us to do was provide an environment where we could meet all those goals. So I think that's a pretty intense, monologue there. That's an introduction to who I am and what we're all about here. And Dennis, if you would like to guide me in where we'd like to go from here.
Sure. Steve, thank you for that overview, and thank you for admitting that, because I think all of us would as well, that we all have an inner geek. So, appreciate you volunteering that. Steve, it might be good information to maybe talk about the decision process as to how your district went through to actually decide to go BYOD. That's something we see. It might sounds like there were some key business drivers, but maybe you can walk through that process, or was there a process to go through to kind of institute that policy?
Well, I think the first thing is that we, in our district, we do, I think, a pretty good job of involving the various stakeholders in our conversations, both in terms of my relationship with folks in the business office and curriculum instruction, and also the conversations that we have with the principals at the sites. We try to. I know that there are some every district is a little different, and having had some experience at the county level, I know I worked with a number of school districts, and several of them are less centralized, perhaps, than we are. In our case, we try to look for best practices that we can duplicate and replicate across the district, so that we're not working at cross purposes, perhaps, and expending funds in lots of different ways and trying to be an expert at lots of different individual things. So we try to work together on those things. So it first of all begins with a discussion with curriculum instruction about where technology's role in the delivery of curriculum is heading. And we had a number of discussions internally, and of course have participated, like many others, in conferences and other opportunities to realize that with the Common Core and with the SBAC on the East Coast, or on the West Coast here, and PARC on the West Coast, East Coast rather, that we absolutely have to have greater density of technology and greater access to technology. It used to be that our model was to have a 10-to-1 ratio of students to technology, or shall we say computers. And if we could meet that in labs and classrooms and elsewhere, we just kind of counted them all up and we said, good to go, we got that 10-to-1, or we don't have that 10-to-1 met. Now you hear a lot of folks talking about 1-to-1, and while that isn't ideal, and it's working in some school districts, in our case with our K-8 school district, we're finding it hard to at least in the foreseeable future, to see that would be possible. But we do see that if you don't get to more like a 4-to-1 ratio of students to technology, that it's very hard to make a difference in the way curriculum is delivered. So the decision to go to invest in the SafeConnect product began with a look at what is on the horizon of what we need. The common acknowledgement on the part of our business office and this curriculum office and technology and the principals and all of cabinet that we're not going to get there from here with only our own funds, and so we have to find a way to rely on the resources that our community can bring to bear. And so then that opens the discussion of, okay, I guess we're going to have to start letting other devices on our network, when at one time that was completely forgotten. Once that decision was made, then it was a matter we have to look at some kinds of solutions out there that would help us to maintain those priorities that I mentioned, keeping the kids safe, when it comes to SEPA, keeping the data safe when it comes to having the right people see the right things and not have access to things they shouldn't, and then also protect the integrity of the network as a whole. And when we looked at all of that and looked at the alternatives that were available, SafeConnect was the cleanest, most well thought out in our mind, and easiest to implement solution that would meet that goal for us, and most cost effective as well. I mean, there's other technologies out there, but I don't think any of them have been thought through with the realities of the K-12 ed tech world in mind, as well as Impulse Point.
And see, we've gotten a message, a chat question, and again, I would remind everyone to, if you have any questions, please submit those to us via the chat system within the GoToMeeting. One of the questions has come to, and effectively, were there any hurdles? Were there any business decision or hurdles that you had to go through? Were there any folks that you had to convince, and kind of obstacles in your decision process?
I'm very grateful for the role that I have and the communication that we have among the various departments in our organization, and I would give the credit to a long-standing attitude in this district that's very much about we are familial with a mission, and as a result, I haven't felt that there has been any argument. I feel completely trusted in the decisions that I have brought to cabinet, the ideas, I should say, that I brought to cabinet, including SafeConnect. There was at one time, a few years ago, as we had the dawning realization that the funding level that we had for technology maintenance and growth and replenishment was insufficient, and this is several years ago, there was the discussion about increasing the amount of funding that we have for technology, to support things like infrastructure and infrastructure replacement. But once that decision was made, and the clarity that everybody began to have, that we have to have a basic infrastructure that can grow with the district, I didn't really have much trouble getting the funds together to do the things that we needed to do. In fact, when everything crashed a few years ago, and it became very difficult to maneuver, what went by the wayside at that time was a long-standing plan that we had for 20% replenishment of technology, classroom technologies, where I would replace 20% a year, so we would never have to have anything more than 5 years old in the classrooms. And that all went by the wayside as a result of the terrible funding cuts we all had to go through. But what never happened was anybody saying that we had to stop funding infrastructure, fundamental infrastructure, and it was seen that the SafeConnect solution was part of that fundamental infrastructure that we needed to have. So I realize that because I have a lot of colleagues, in my role in SETPA, I have lots of conversations with the technology professionals up and down the state and in other states, and I realize that not all of us have that experience, because sometimes we're reliant on maybe not only guns or butter, there's not enough money to do everything in any of our school districts, but there's also a disparity in the level of understanding on the part of the superintendents, in some cases the CBOs and other folks that are decision makers, about the criticality of maintaining your infrastructure properly and how everything else kind of falls from that. But there's no lack of understanding with my colleagues here in the district, and I'm just very fortunate about that.
Great. And Steve, any advice you could maybe give to the group as to there's a lot of jargon, whether it's BYOD, MDM, network access control. There's a lot of terminology being thrown around, and maybe talk through as your definition, how you define BYOD. And
well, sure. I think first of all, in terms of this kind of leads from the last answer in terms of how do you get what kind of grief you have and what kind of hurdles you have to get over. One of the things that we geeks suffer from is a lack of clarity or lack of understanding that other people have in the organization about the role of technology. And part of that is our own darn fault, because we're so happy being geeks and talking geek speak that we don't realize that, or we don't notice that the superintendent and the principals and the other decision makers that we have to rely on, that their eyes glaze over when we start doing too much of that geek speak. And so whether it's BYOD or whether it's SNMP or whether it's SFlow or whether it's, Juniper Firewall or any of that kind of stuff, I always have to guard myself, and I ask my staff also to do the same thing, to remember to sell the sizzle and not the steak, In other words, what my assistant superintendent of curriculum instruction wants to hear about BYOD is not the word BYOD so much, but how awesome it's going to be that Johnny can bring that device that he got from his grandma at Christmas in and start doing classwork with it right away without having to do a lot of training for the teachers and so on and so forth. So in terms of use of words and things like that, I think it's real important that we always, from our geeky point of view, that we remember that we've got to sell the sizzle, not the steak, and try to keep things on the 30,000-foot level, as far as viewing what it's going to look like when all this cool stuff happens, and then get into the detail as people show interest in hearing or wanting to hear the detail.
Absolutely.
So I'm not sure if that addressed your question directly, Dennis. You were talking about what our definition of BYOD is. Is that
No, I think you did, as far as basically putting it into industry terms, putting it into business terms. I think is the key. Steve, any guidance on metrics as far as goals, success, and how you track that success and metrics
in terms of whether or not we are succeeding in our project plans? That's what you mean?
Yes.
Well, it's important to note, and I know, Dennis, you and I and Ann had spoken about this earlier, that different districts are at different levels in BYOD deployment. And I have a few colleagues that I rely on and up and down the state that are just really doing some amazing things with BYOD already. And so, in our case, BYOD is bring your own device is a plan for the future, clarity about a direction that we're going, but it isn't something that, and yesterday was the last day of the school year for us, and all the teachers and all the kiddies have gone home, and now we can actually get some work done. But as we concluded that year, I can tell you that we didn't conclude the year with a bunch of kiddies having their devices from home that they brought in and teachers bringing all their devices from home. What we're doing is preparing for a world in which we know that's going to be the case, okay? So when I look at what I would consider success at this stage, success for me would be knowing that I can say to a teacher that's got some great ideas and support of their principal to allow their kids to bring devices into their particular classroom, that I can say there's nothing on the technology side that would inhibit you from doing that, and I would welcome you, working with the parents in your classroom to have their kids bring their stuff in so that we can start measuring that and doing some action research and look at best practices developing in the way in regards to BYOD. So for us, it's making sure the infrastructure, success for us at this point is completing the project so that the infrastructure isn't in the way of success. Okay, so to that measure, our SafeConnect system is in place. We've got a number of policies that we've created, that we've tested, that are working, that we're using. We are now at the point where our casual guest user is able to get on our network with our permission, and we know that it's safe. We're doing some tweaking around the edges with that so that we can start simplifying the process of staff members bringing in their own tablet-based devices, simplifying their access to the Internet using SafeConnect's controls. So for us, again, we're at tweaking level, and success metrics are are we, as sites are ready to implement things, are we able to say that technology is not the hindrance?
Right. Absolutely. Okay. A question has come in talking about any challenges or concerns really focused on the diversity of devices. Right. Every week there's a new device that's coming out, and any challenges with supporting those, the diversity of those devices with your implementation.
Okay, so that's a really good question, and part of the reason why SafeConnect is such an awesome solution for us, because first thing that has to be defined when you decide to open the door for outside devices or devices that the district doesn't own is, what is technology's role in helping people to make effective use of those technologies? And our answer to that question is that if it's one of the official, our word that we use is the tech plan minimum, because we have a district-wide technology plan that sets certain minimum technology amounts in terms of quantities and types of device and all that we are officially supporting, and those we will replace and we will maintain and we will provide licensing for and all that stuff. So outside of that tech plan minimum, anything else that comes into our network, if it's not owned by the district, we don't have responsibility for it. And it's the user, just as if they went to a hotel or went to Starbucks, to see the instructions on how to log in and log in. And if they can't log in, to talk to their provider or their, whoever they bought their computer from or whatever, to get some advice on how to make things work. So we do have to draw that line, because otherwise we're going to become the personal tech staff to everybody's personal computers and personal devices. Now, in terms of how SafeConnect helps us to make it easy for people to get on the network and easy to protect our network, SafeConnect has the ability to recognize the type of a device that's attempting to connect to the network. Is it an Android device? Is it an iOS device? Is it a Mac? Is it a PC? Is it a Linux device? And based on what it recognizes as a signature of that device, and therefore knowing what kind of device it is, you can tell SafeConnect, you can set up policies to have it do certain things. So in our case, we have it so that if it's a Linux or a Mac or a PC, Linux device, a Mac device, or a PC, the first thing it does is it looks at that device and determines whether it has up-to-date security and whether the antivirus, there's an active, approved antivirus device on that product. And if there is, then we let them on. If there isn't, then the SafeConnect automatically takes them through a process of vetting and cleaning. And, here you need to get security updates, go to this website. Here you need an antivirus, go to that website. And basically manages automatically the process of making sure that that device should be allowed on our network because it's clean and it's protected. In the case of a tablet-type device, if it's an Android or iOS device, we're not so concerned about virus. And so, again, we have policies that then just allow it to get appropriate access to the network from that iOS device. And so our management of various kinds of devices is greatly simplified, because you can set policies in the SafeConnect to kind of be your unpaid tech managing all that stuff on its own, without with dynamic websites that come up, or I should say HTML pages that come up from the SafeConnect device instructing the user on what to do next, and depending on what kind of device they have and the state that it's in. So that's one of the critical, cool things that it does for us.
Thank you, Steve. And then from maybe some advice you can share with how to get started. I think again we often hear a lot of interest in this topic, but it's just what are the few ways to get started? Any advice and maybe also Steve, some guidance as lessons learned. Because you've gone through an implementation and maybe some shared experience as to maybe things you could advise the group as to things to watch out for, or things to be especially concerned about But really, how do we get started?
Okay, well, excuse me. Let's see. A couple of things. First of all, in our case, the getting started began with finding what I would consider a safe, non-pressure environment to find out more. And in our case, that was an opportunity to participate with other education leaders in a pretty comprehensive review of the SafeConnect product. And then we also looked at other products as well, and were able to confirm that for us, price-wise and support and et cetera, Impulse Point was the direction we wanted to move in. Once that decision was made and we were able to work out the details of pricing and all that stuff and get rolling, the next thing was to really take a look at our network. And we did that in conjunction with the Impulse Point engineers, and they were very good about getting copies of our network design and working with my in-house engineer in detail about how everything looks and how everything works, and then coming up with a battle plan to begin implementing the system. One of the things that became, in terms of lessons learned for us, is that the SafeConnect, and I'll say that virtually all of the devices that do this kind of work for you rely very heavily on S-Flow, which is a protocol, a switch protocol that manages and monitors the kinds of packets coming across, and then allows you to dynamically set ACLs and things like that without doing. You set up the process, and then the switches magically do their stuff on their own with I call it auto magically with using the SafeConnect system. But what we found is one thing that we were reliant on at the time was a device that was on our core switch. We had an HP core switch, and there was a module at that time that we were told would support this need, which was the HP's TMS module. And I am quite certain that they, I'm sure, have fixed whatever problems they had with it at the time, but it was kind of like the Achilles heel for us, and that this particular module that would manage the S-Flow traffic for us in and out of the SafeConnect system and onto our other switches, we were dependent on that working. And at that time, that wasn't, we weren't able to get, and nor were the HP folks able to get that early version of that TMS module to work for us. Ultimately, what we ended up doing is putting in the core switch in our course, in our MDF, our main distribution facility at the district office. We put in a Brocade switch, which does a really, really good job of supporting S-Flow, and we use that to mitigate the traffic that is generated by SafeConnect and working with the other switches. So that Brocade switch was a big help to us, and we ended up not needing to use and actually removing that TMS device from HP. So no knock on HP. We're almost entirely an HP house in this district, and we have loved HP for many years, but that particular module, which wasn't ready for prime time, became quite a stumbling block for us early on in the implementation of the SafeConnect project, and it was mitigated by swapping that device out for a Brocade device, which, by the way, was the recommendation at the time of our friends at SafeConnect, and I just didn't believe them. So trust your SafeConnect engineer.
Thanks.
Yeah, and in terms of other lessons learned or approaches, another approach for us that has been very successful is while you can turn on all SafeConnect features on all points of access to your network, both wired and unwired, and ultimately that's the place we want to go because, SafeConnect is a network access controller, and we certainly want to make sure that if Sally Teachwell gets several computers donated to her from her church and she brings into her classroom and plugs them into ports, Ethernet ports in her classroom, and those things turned out to be infected up the wazoo, we certainly don't want those infected devices to infect our network. So we should have that same ability to vet those donated computers in Sally Teachwell's classroom on the wire the way we would do anything else. But in our case, what we found to be effective, because there are a lot of most of our technologies that are managed in-house, and probably I would venture to say this is probably true with most school districts, they are connected to the wired network, including network printers, network servers, network workstations, etc. And so we were concerned about turning on SafeConnect in those environments right away, knowing that we would have to do some tweaking, and until all that tweaking was done, we would have a tremendous disruption in our use of technology in the district. So what we did instead was we began with the district office's wireless network, and then we expanded that to the wireless networks at various schools, one school at a time, each time doing a little tweaking, a little learning, until we could feel confident that turning on all management of the wireless network with SafeConnect was a safe thing to do. And when we did, it worked cleanly. And now what we've begun doing is, we haven't completed this project, but we probably halfway through turning on the full management of our wired network through SafeConnect as well. Again, working school by school and keeping a close eye on each school as we do it, and being prepared with the resources in-house to do instant tweaking, as we found little problems in the way we were implementing. So it's been pretty smooth working incrementally like that.
No, thanks, Stephen. Definitely one of our best practices as well is to crawl, walk, run, right? Take definitely a phased-in approach, and even though you can turn the entire district on at one time, it's always a good idea to phase things in. Steve, a few questions that I'll try to consolidate for you, and we can certainly assist here. Is how the system, it was more of a technical question, as to how the system leverages your Active Directory environment and the ability to assign different roles, responsibilities, based on the identity of that user. So kind of a couple of questions in there, but if you've got any.
Well, it definitely ties in with Active Directory, and we can set up security groups to enable access to various kinds of various components of the network and various features of the network, and it's all sync-free. You write initially my engineer would make frequent calls to the SafeConnect engineers to help them with putting together these policies that, sometimes used Active Directory. Sometimes were related to the type of device connecting. Sometimes were related to where a device was connecting, whether it's at a given site, a given VLAN, wired or wireless, that sort of thing. But it is completely flexible in utilizing those various ways of identifying the traffic and assigning access levels dynamically based on that. I would also like to say that that reminds me, I think about the process, the learning process that Jeff, my engineer, has gone through in really becoming quite adept at tweaking little things here and there as we come up with new things we want to do with the SafeConnect. There was an extended period of time that really kind of amazed me when we started working with SafeConnect. I mean, we worked with lots and lots of vendors on projects big and small, I'm sure, like all the rest of you have over the years. But the extent to which the SafeConnect folks were serious about making sure that this would be a successful implementation really amazed me. I mean, for a fairly extended period of time, they held weekly meetings with Jeff on the phone where they would jump in. It might be 10 minutes, might be an hour, depending on what Jeff was working with. Where someone from the engineering staff at SafeConnect would set up a little webinar, would have Jeff remote into some device over on the SafeConnect side, or more often where the SafeConnect folks would remote into our devices and would help Jeff walk through this piece or that piece, and until and the SafeConnect folks are like bulldogs. I mean, that they kept those meetings up until we finally said, we don't need them anymore. Thank you. We're done. We don't need another weekly call. We'll call you if we need you.